All right, welcome to the next episode. We've got
Hi.
a fantastic guest today. We've got Wayllon Lu, who is here. He
Uh,
is a
uh,
former banker now. He's come through the whole process, got the got the internship, got the full-time offer, and has moved on to a new opportunity. So we're going to be exploring that journey with him. And so let's dive into it. Way, welcome to the discussion. Tell us more about yourself. Where'd you grow up? How'd you end up at U of I in Urbana? And what were your career goals then? And what's your career goal now?
Awesome. Thanks, Ben. Appreciate you guys having me on. So I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago. Public high school. Throughout high school is trying to figure out, what the interests may be. And originally just Googling kind of like what are some of the best careers. Thought anesthesiologist or some sort of medical field, would please my parents. And so my parents did a good job of kind of putting me in some summer camps throughout high school. So like took like a physics course at Northwestern after freshman year. It was so hard, probably the hardest class I've ever taken, and kind of probably convinced me that's maybe not my path. Then did like a medical seminar the following year, and then junior year, this was kind of the spark, the finance spark, was the a course at Columbia. So I got introduced to kind of like the New York area, and it was about corporate valuation. What is a company worth? And first time in my life, like had no problem with homework, really enjoyed doing it, wanted to spend extra time on it, and really just kind of dove into it. So it just, I don't know what it was exactly, but it kind of fascinated me trying to value a company and didn't know at all what I was doing, but it inspired me enough when I got back senior year to kind of explore valuation, right? So like looking up YouTube videos on what a DCF is and all those kind of introductory valuation concepts. So I knew I was going to try to pursue something in investing, as broad as that is. And then how I chose colleges, I don't recommend anyone follow this advice, but I only applied to 3 schools, all in state, partially for my girlfriend, who I'm still with today, fortunately, but was also going to stay in state. So I only applied to like DePaul, University of Illinois, Northwestern. Got into Illinois, DePaul, waitlisted from Northwestern, then declined. So it was a pretty natural, almost like decision was made for me. And I had a couple friends going to Illinois too. So, growing up in
Nice.
in the Chicago burbs. So getting onto campus, you're an undeclared kind of business major for your first year or so. So they give you some time to figure out what your classes are going to be. You take some of those kind of not gen eds, but those required business courses in each kind of field to kind of feel out what your strengths are. And then pretty soon got introduced to a business fraternity on campus that was super helpful for just meeting upperclassmen, getting into that kind of having a community on campus and having people to look up to, that you have no issues kind of going up and speaking with and asking for advice. So a few of those people happened to be going into investment banking. And initially I heard investment banking, thought it was investing, right? So that kind of, I thought aligned. And then you learn that you're not really, buying, or you could do trading, but in the field that they were looking at was the M&A, right? M&A advisory roles. So they're like, hey, if you want to do the investing track, why not start off in banking? It's a great training grounds. Gave me the whole pitch, right, about the learning experience, the opportunities that come after it, and how it's just a great kind of launching pad for your career. So I was sold pretty quickly and got involved in a few different clubs on campus to kind of go down that path. So ended up interning for a small investment bank sophomore year. Then Moelis was my big junior year internship, and then went full time with Moelis in their New York office, and spent about a year and a half there working, mostly doing sell side M&A. And the business services practice was my kind of go-to. Got along with the team very well, and then eventually I ended up going to a client. So worked for on a transaction for my current company, Pritchard, for about 8 months. And shortly after that, the CFO of the company asked if I would come join the team. Was never really, on my roadmap to join a facility services company, janitorial services company. But after speaking with them and a bunch of my mentors and a bunch of, Moelis people who were happy to kind of give their advice, I ended up taking the role. So joined that company in a corporate finance role in February 2022. Spent about 2 years in that role, and just recently transitioned to like an operational excellence role, helping a division kind of do a redesign of how it goes about its route-based delivery model.
Awesome. Awesome. No, love that story, and a lot of things we want to dig into on that, and share more pieces of that experience. But since you dug into your current role there, how are you thinking, how are you thinking differently about your current career goal versus where you were when you graduated? Certainly you were focused on investment banking then. I'm guessing that's evolved. So tell us a little bit more about how your career goal has evolved since you graduated.
Yeah, so for me, it was always looking at like two big buckets. Like, do you want to be on the investment side, or do you want to be in industry more on the operations side? There's great career opportunities in both. And initially, I thought there was no doubt I would be on the investing side. And I still enjoy like that as kind of like a side passion or a hobby, looking at public markets and I don't think that interest ever completely goes away. But in
Yeah.
terms of like career trajectory, I was seeing like from my perspective, private equity being maybe a little bit more saturated, a little bit like kind of later stage, and so I thought there was maybe going to be more of an opportunity in the operating roles within those private equity owned companies to kind of grow your own business. Plus, there's always going to be in the back of your mind, I think, this, do we want to go into something entrepreneurial, right? So getting some sort of company experience while a lot of my friends and colleagues were getting the investment experience, I thought might kind of, maybe one day we'll have kind of different skill sets and still be able to join up, right? So it was a tough decision, obviously, because I think jumping off that train, the investment banking to private equity path, it's almost like tailor made. It's kind of a logical or
Yeah.
very common next
That's
step.
blasphemy.
Exactly. So it was a difficult decision at the time, but looking back, it's been a phenomenal learning experience. I
Yeah.
can't lie from a personal standpoint too. There's a lot of upside in moving over to the corporate side, but I think a lot of those the habits that you build up through the banking experience and stuff, if you don't get too lazy with it, a lot of that stuff I think sticks for a long time. I've been out of it for about 3 years now, and I still think still thank my banking experience for a lot of the work ethic and your kind of ability to manage up and down. You get that through the fire of investment banking.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Well, because what I see you saying is what you found is you thought you'd be more of a specialist in M&A, or maybe, like you said, maybe investment management, M&A advisory,
Yeah.
that sort of world. But then it sounds like you've pivoted more to, like, I would call it a general manager track, um, right? Where you can go, again, more of a cross-functional leader, getting exposure to the different functions, as opposed to going like the managing director path or the PE, path, which is a little more down the fairway, if you will,
Yes.
to use a to use a golf. So yeah, okay. I see you nodding. So that makes a lot of sense to me. So talk more about that. I mean, I think that's something that a lot of people aren't thinking about. You mentioned that PE might be a little oversaturated right now. A lot of students right now, it's their goal. They're thinking heavily about PE. So talk a little bit about that decision, and why was moving to a client the right decision for you?
Yeah, so I thought, there's definitely merit. Like if you go into do the private equity associate track and then figure out after if you want to join a portfolio company, I think there's invaluable experience you get on the buy side, right? To kind of sharpen and evolve the skill set you get probably doing a lot of sell side advisory in the investment banking world. So it's hard to say what the right decision is, quote unquote. But I thought, why not jump if my path is going to be post private equity, get into an operating role anyways, maybe why not kind of get that experience now, right? Because that's kind of what I
Yeah.
thought helped me through the college and investment banking path, was getting that early start, that earlier interest. I was fortunate enough to kind of have that interest in high school. I thought I felt put me ahead of the curve a little bit during recruiting in that kind of initial years post college. And so I thought, if that worked for me there, right or wrong, maybe try that in the operating experience too. So kind of get 2 years of working at a company, seeing how you go from, because I worked on this transaction, you see the growth, kind of the roadmap you put together in the marketing materials, and then actually going through and trying to execute that is a whole nother, right, a whole nother challenge. It's the real challenge. So
Yeah.
I wanted to see, because I had that experience and that kind of background and context around what we said the company was going to do, what is it like to actually execute on that plan? And so I thought
Yeah.
that was a unique opportunity because I had that context and got stars aligned in that sense.
And I think that's really interesting because that's the unique part here. It's not so unique that you'd be in a banking role and go into industry. That's
Yeah.
not so unique, but it is unique to work for a client, help shape that plan, that transaction, those strategic next steps, and then jump over to actually be part of the solution and actually, bringing that forward and executing on it. And that's really unique and a cool opportunity. And it's fantastic you got to dive in. Um, well, why don't we zoom out a little bit and go back? Because I know a lot of our listeners are, looking at you and sort of maybe envying your position and all the success you've had with a great investment banking internship sophomore year, a better one junior year, getting that full-time offer, and then be able to transition into industry. So kind of go back, when you were a freshman, when you were a sophomore, what were some of because now you've got the benefit of hindsight,
Yeah.
and then you didn't really know, you're trying to figure things out, but now you've got the benefit of hindsight. So with the benefit of hindsight, like what advice would you give to yourself, back as a freshman or a sophomore, or, what advice do you have for our audience who might fit into that category?
Yeah, of course. So, I knew going to Illinois, especially freshman year, you start to get introduced into the investment banking path, and you become well aware that, Illinois is not a target school per se for a lot of, especially like if you wanted to go to New York or SF outside of the Chicago area, which Chicago, we do have a lot of success recruiting into. But you've realized you have to be a little creative. You have that little chip on your shoulder of I have to do a little bit more, whether this is true or not. In your mind, you believe you have to do more than the average or the people you're competing against for these roles. And so I think as soon as you think you might be interested in investment banking, it's your job to then just kind of like scratch that itch and then confirm, right? So you always want to validate whatever interests you have. So for me, it was clubs on campus. We were fortunate to have this kind of feeder academy organization called Prime, which basically introduced you to investment banking. Explain what the industry is and is like. You have people who have interned, so these were seniors who have just done their junior internship, who are coming and talking about their experience interning. You might have some full-time employees come back and speak to the class. You ask questions about what the job is like, what the life is like, and and if you like what you hear, then you go through the program, which includes like a case competition. You do your whole. It's basically a pitch deck, right? So you're trying to convince this panel that your team should get hired to represent them in a sale process. So you get some of that practical experience with either a fictitious company or just some random public company, and you go through some of the stuff that Adventus teaches you, right? You put together your valuation of the company. You realize that in a pitch deck valuation, you make your mistakes, right? So valuation you might spend, because maybe for me the most interesting part, you spend 99% of your time trying to get that valuation down to the dollar, and then you realize you still have to put together 40 pages on whatever it is. So
Industry dynamics and exactly
the buyer universe. You realize so you learn throughout the process, and if you're not kind of dismayed by the fact that valuation isn't kind of always the main part of the job, you still like the storytelling element and the research element, all the diligence you're doing. Then you get that validation, right? And then at Illinois, there was fortunate enough to have an academy after that kind of then coaches you through the recruitment process. But whether you have that or not, it's all about then, figuring out, doing your research online. What's the interview process like? How do you even get an interview, right? Typically, it's difficult to pass the resume screens. These banks get thousands and thousands of applicants.
Yeah.
So how do you bypass that? Well, networking, right? That comes up in a lot of forums, whatever you use online. And so you have to break up your recruiting into networking to get your foot in the door, and then you have to pass the interview screens, right? So that's going to be the technical prep, your behavioral prep, your company specific prep.
Well, let's dig into networking a little bit. It's such a critical topic, and I think that there's, for every person there's a different opinion about networking.
Yes.
But what's your view on that? And specifically, I'd love to hear what during your networking, what tactics or techniques did you find most effective? And also, I'd like to dig into what was a key moment? What was the one networking conversation that stands out where you turned a corner and you're like, hey, this is working for me?
Yes. Got it.
Yeah.
So I thought there were generally two approaches that people employed for networking. One of which was start with your your close connection. So either someone you know in the industry or like an alumni, someone you have a connection with that you have a kind of greater likelihood of maybe getting a response. And then the other school, and if that's your first few calls, you might kind of slip up. It happens, right? It's a little bit of a numbers game. You may not ask the most intelligent questions. You may not have the smoothest conversation initially as you kind of learn what those networking calls feel like and what, kind of garners the interests of the person who's taking time out of their day, right, to speak to you. So the other school of thought, if you're not going to go with and almost waste your close connection calls, is to like reach out to random, like in a city maybe you're not necessarily recruiting for, like low stakes calls where you can maybe mess up a little bit. The downside of that, of course, is you can view it potentially as a wasted call, because if you have a good conversation and you never really had interest with that bank, are you wasting their time? Are you wasting your time? Right? So I think generally speaking, people tended to go the former route, which is reach out to people you're connected with that you do want to kind of pursue. And I've had good success there. One of the benefits of reaching out to people you have a connection with is maybe they'll cut you some slack. I don't know. If you really mess up on the call, which is kind of hard to do, it's possible that you don't get a second opportunity at that.
Yeah. But if we could, let's, I think that networking conversation is, it's just so important. Which you brought up as a concern a lot of people have, which is like, I don't want to be wasting other people's time. I'm not sure if I'm interested in that bank. I'm not sure if I'm interested in this career path. I don't want to reach out because I might be wasting people's time. And I just want to tell them, you can't think like that.
Right.
You can't think like that. And it's a human way to think. You're having a human emotion. It's a human experience to have that sort of self-doubt. But if you don't do that, then you're really going to waste their time if you take a job and then quit after 6 months because it's the wrong opportunity. Then you've really wasted their time. So I guess, it sounds like though you sort of came through that. But what's that one conversation that sticks out to you now when you're able to look back?
Yeah, for sure. And just real quick on that kind of thought process. Yeah, I think you have to remember that the people who you're reaching out to also went through the same process. So it's easy to forget when you're in the industry. You're busy. It feels like taking 30 minutes aside feels like an eternity when you could be leaving 30 minutes earlier or something. But just remember that they had to go through the same networking process, and everyone understands it. No one's looking at
they know the deal.
They know the deal. So. But on that one conversation, it was really a trip. So for me, I knew I was recruiting in the New York region, right, for banks there. Being in Chicago, it was harder to, sometimes the phone calls, you have to do them, but sometimes you're going to have better conversations face to face. So during my spring break, I think this was sophomore year spring break, spent that time to actually fly out to New York and schedule in-person conversations. So I spent the week in New York. I remember it being, some sort of blizzard. You all have the stories of the trials and tribulations of trying to get that through. But fortunately, people were still willing to meet with me because I had traveled all the way. They're more likely, I think, to respond to your emails when you're making that extra effort, right? So if you happen to be, in the whatever area that you're recruiting for, it's great to try to schedule in-person conversations if you can make it happen. And so that trip is really where I started to gain a ton of traction. I was having some success here and there throughout before spring break, just doing some calls, but nothing I felt like, I really have momentum with these firms. But that spring break trip, I think, turned it all around. So I was able to schedule a bunch of people, a bunch of chats with people at Moelis, was able to visit the office, got connected with the way Moelis did it at the time was they had a kind of like a non-target recruiting leads. And if you can get that conversation in with them, you're more likely, right, to move in that process. So that New York trip was helpful, right? Because I didn't start off with that person. You'd have to have great luck to just, stumble upon that networking call. But had a few conversations with analysts and associates that eventually referred me to that non-target recruiting lead. Went into the office, spoke with them for about an hour, and after that, I felt like there's a really good shot I'm getting invited for a first round interview.
Awesome. Yeah, you're like, I'm on their radar. I'm on the map now. That's fantastic. Yeah, you make some really good hidden points in there. And so things to take away is a lot of banks treat a non-target school recruiting as if it's its own target school. right? And they'll assign a lead recruiter and a supporting person. A lot of these are bankers who are leading this process, who are as their side gig, during when they're working long weeks anyway. And so it's something to know. If you are at a non-target school, that's your real goal through your networking process is, figure out if you want to do that as a career, figure out if you want to work at that bank. But then you've got to figure out, okay, who is the non-target school recruiting lead? Who is that person? And how do I start to get in front of them? And it's going to take time. You're a detective, right? You got to follow up on leads. You hit a dead end and you got to figure a new way around. Yeah, so I think that's a really great story, that there's some cool lessons learned. Excellent. So cool. And the other thing you bring up too is like the importance of getting boots on the ground, like getting in person. Like how powerful is it when you reach out to say someone, hey, I flew across the country to be here. Can you just come downstairs?
Exactly.
Right? I mean, if you frame it like that, how do they say no? They're like, oh, geez, the guy flew across the country from Chicago. Man, okay, I'll go downstairs and have a coffee,
Yes. Yeah. I know. And I'm sure the students going through the recruitment process are about to. It's a humbling experience. You're going to send out 100 emails, to start, and maybe if you're lucky, you get 10 responses, maybe because initially you're starting with connections and stuff like that. Once you get through your alumni network or people you're, one or two connections away from, it becomes a grind. So anything you can do to give yourself an advantage for a higher response rate, just get in front of people, get people on the phone, whatever you can do to make that happen is going to be worth it.
Yep. Well said. So, okay. So that's some great networking tips. Beyond the networking piece, what did you do? What helps you in terms of technical prep? How did you approach that? Beyond the academic coursework.
Yeah, I really think the academic coursework only goes so far. I was a finance and accounting major, so you learn some of the formulas in class, great. But how do you actually apply that, to an interview setting or to a case study or whatever it is? So there's a couple things you can do. The most basic that anyone can do, basically free of charge, I think, is look into these online guides, right? I think we use these Breaking the Wall Street guide, whatever it was, Wall Street Oasis. Forget the brand, but they have 100 technical questions that you should know. So
the 400 questions.
Yeah, 400 exactly, that list, right? And so yes, you should definitely study that over your breaks after class. You have to put in the extra time. It's really hard, to stumble into an investment banking opportunity and pass the technical prep, especially coming, I think, from a non-target school. And I think even more so if you're a finance and accounting major, there's maybe a little bit more of a standard expectation that you know some of this stuff. So, so the guides are one thing, right? But that only still gets you, the first phase is maybe memorization, and then you start to get deeper knowledge of the concepts. But then we get into like the practical, I think, like creating these models, taking what you see on the guides and actually applying it to something, right? So a few ways to get experience with that. One, if you can get into case studies, right? So whether that's on campus, there's nationally organized case studies that you can do valuation concepts for, valuation practice for. And then you have these other programs like Adventus, right? Adventus is huge at Illinois. So Dave, obviously that's his alma mater, and that has become such a focal point of the investment banking prep program because you get that practical experience, right? Building a financial model, like 3-statement model plus, different valuation models from scratch. And then really that's what helps you go from memorization of these topics to understanding the finer details and the nuances that go into building it, right? And then having that experience to kind of speak to. So instead of just kind of saying whatever's on the guides, well, you can say, well, when I built XYZ model, right? This is how I applied, or these are the kind of challenges that I ran into, and here's how I kind of worked around it. So I think those are the three ways, right? You have case studies, you have your kind of prep programs like Adventus, and then you have your technical guides that will help you, again, from a technical perspective in those interviews.
Yeah, that's a great learning arc. I think a lot of people they know they have to do the memorize stuff, right? Yeah. They know you got your formulas and your questions, and I got to know the answer.
Yeah.
And I think, but students just getting in, I know that many of them when they're getting started, they don't appreciate moving from the memorization piece and getting academically familiar with something to the to the application of it and actually putting those knowledge into practice in some way, and how a case competition or a case study or even just a case exercise, on a weekend that you're going to an event or something starts to help you build those muscles. And of course you mentioned Adventist. So yeah, I guess how would you say more about that? I mean, how did Adventist help you with respect to starting to build that skill set with respect to application of some of these principles?
So Adventist and the case studies were really my first exposure into the practical application of all the concepts that you're reading about, learning about, watching YouTube videos about, whatever it is. And so it's like how do I explain it? Like a formal, it's something you can actually showcase and put, as simple as it is, like on a resume. So I think it's all kind of circular in a way. Like the Adventist prep, yes, helps you kind of refine and really develop your kind of financial expertise, your understanding of how to do the modeling concepts, right? At a very foundational level. But then even when it comes to that, now is stuff that you can put on the resume for networking, right? So it all kind of feeds into the same. It's not like this is, or any of these prep programs like Adventist is just this siloed exercise that you do for technical preparation alone. That may be the primary benefit or one of the main benefits you get. But then also from a networking perspective, you are now able to showcase and demonstrate, right, some experience that is relevant for that career path, that when you're reaching out to people, they can see that you've taken steps on your own time, maybe on your own time, to get into that industry, right? And it's just increasing that likelihood of this is a person worth taking a chance on and worth speaking to.
Yep. No, that's a great point. A lot of this investment banking process comes down to risk management, is how I like to think about it from the bank side, right? Yeah. They're trying to run their math on how do I hire someone who's the lowest risk possible.
Yes.
And when you go above and beyond with some of these things, whether that be a certification or whether that be a case study, case competition, joining the club, leading the club, all these different ways where you can excel and go above and beyond. That is not just it's a resume bullet, great, but it's also a story that you can tell in the interview. But it also actually de-risks you as a candidate, because they're like, wow, this person is really dedicated to this career path. Yes. They're a lower risk. Let's consider them more than we might have otherwise.
Yeah, you nailed it. And you'd be surprised how often it comes up on networking calls, because, whether they recognize the program or not, they recognize the bullet points, right? All the relevant bullet points near it. And then you'll typically ask, what is this program? What did you do? And then it just kind of opens up the door to kind of expand on and kind of show off, right? Like that you got the level 2 certification, what that means. You had to, I forgot the time limit, but you had to get, X amount of, you only had X amount of errors within this time frame to build everything from scratch. And they're
fully circular 3-statement model in under 90 minutes.
There you go.
That's the standard. Yeah. I do want to talk a little. The last thing I would say about the technical prep here, or that I would like to dig into a little bit, is on the when you get on the desk. Yes. What are the skills? What are the skills that you look at that really helped you when you first got on the desk? That could be the junior year internship. Maybe it's after graduation. You choose. But what are some of those key skills that really helped you in that first 30, 60 days? Kind of hit the ground running.
So I think as simple as it is, because you're going to make mistakes. There's no way, as much prep as you're going to do throughout college, it's really hard to simulate or replicate on-the-job experience. I haven't figured out a way to do it. So, yeah. So you're going to make mistakes, but the key that you get through the technical preparation, I think, is at least you have a foundation, right, a base to kind of know what you're even looking at. That's one thing. But also as simple as knowing, the color coding format, making it easier for whoever is going to try and catch your mistakes, making it as easy as possible for them, right, to follow your work and find where you may have gone wrong and give you feedback. You don't want to make their job any harder, right? It's already hard. You'll realize it's already hard for an analyst, a full-time analyst, to want to give something to a new first year or an intern, right? Because it's going to take them triple the amount of time, right? So instead of making it 4 times as long for them because they have to come find your errors, make it as easy as possible for them to follow your thought process and work stream. And I think that goes a long way, right? Because then they're more willing to coach you. It's easier to coach you, and then you'll kind of get up to speed quicker that way.
Yep. Absolutely. You make a really good point about some of the model hygiene, if you will, the model maintenance. It's It's not exciting. It's not glamorous, but it is the nuts and bolts. It is the blocking and tackling,
Yep.
the stuff that happens in the trenches of investment banking. And like you said, the purpose is it's like, why do we have to color code and why does the formatting matter? That's just making it pretty. That's not, there's no substance behind that. If you think that, you're just wrong. It means you've never done modeling before. You've never had to unscrew somebody's horrible model that had hard codes buried everywhere, and you change one thing and nothing goes through and it flows through and you're like, what in the world?
Exactly.
So, what was there a time when you felt really like when you're on the desk and like were you able to share your screen and you felt really confident in like what you were sharing and your ability to make on the fly changes to a model? Like, did you have that type of experience where you were able to stand out in a positive way?
Yeah, for sure. So like it happens all the time, right? When you're in the kind of like the depths of a process, when you're maybe finalizing the model for the SIP or updating forecasts for, during the management presentation process, you're going to be on with management, and you as the analyst are probably going to be the go-to person. You were the one who probably built it, worked on it the most. And so, yeah, sharing screen, it's nerve-wracking in the beginning, no doubt, right? You feel a little stage fright or you don't want to make the wrong move, but I think all the reps that you get throughout, right? Starting all the way at early college, maybe getting that initial Excel experience, learning shortcuts, learning how to be efficient, moving through the screen and the models, knowing where everything's at. That all just it becomes natural, as you walk through it. And so I'm trying to think of a specific example. It did happen with the transaction with Pritchard. It was more of a, I don't remember the details of it, but it was more of a, we were able to crank through it. And then the sense of relief when you're like, wow, when you hear from, the CFO or someone on the management team being like, I've never seen someone move this fast in Excel. Like if we had 20 of this guy, we would be, unstoppable here. So you get those little, those little compliments, helps build your confidence. You're like, you know what? I do know what I'm doing here. Yeah, you're right. So
yeah. Wow. Yeah. No, that's got to feel great when you're able to do that, not really knowing how well it's going to go, and then you get the feedback that you've never seen someone move that fast in Excel. Like, wow, that's high praise right there. It probably doesn't. You don't get a ton of compliments, so when they do come, it feels really good.
It does.
That's awesome. No, I appreciate digging in. I think these stories are great. You're really showing what's underneath the hood of what it's like to be on the desk and how those hard skills that you build during training can really come to fruition and pay off down the road.
And it's not always Excel shortcuts. I remember learning through, whether it was a Ventus or a different training program, just Windows shortcuts or, just how to navigate quickly.
Yeah, PowerPoint.
Exactly. Yeah. And you'd be amazed. Like, I know it's difficult initially, right, to get used
window switching.
Yeah, exactly. But it pays off, massive dividends down the road because, you're going to be working long hours. And if you can save yourself over the course of a day, 30 minutes, an hour, just by moving faster on the keys, it's something you never forget and let go. And it's funny how often it impresses people too,
Yeah. Well, you clearly made a great impression on your client, who then ultimately wanted to hire you. So another great reason to share your screen and impress the people you're working with, because that can actually turn into new job opportunities.
You never know. Yes.
You never know. No, that's great. So kind of what else? I mean, what was kind of one of the biggest myths maybe that you thought? Like, what was something that you thought was true kind of coming into the process that turned out not to be true or just didn't meet your expectations?
Surprisingly for me, I was kind of like a technical nerd in a way. So I really thought you could win interviews off technical preparation, not alone, but like that was the dominant kind of screening factor. I do not believe that is true at all anymore. Because being on the other side, so I was like one of the non-target recruiting leads at Moelis, and like there's like a baseline technical, threshold that you have to have, but you're not going to like wow someone who's working that job day to day by your technical expertise of a college student. So,
what?
Exactly. So that was one thing that kind of surprised me. And they want you, I think, also to have the realization that technicals and Excel is a part of the job, arguably a big part of the job, but there's so much beyond that, right? You have administrative work, project management work, PowerPoint skills are massive. So, showing off your, expansive knowledge about how a DCF works is not going to set you apart from another candidate. It really does come down to, I think, a lot of behavioral concepts and, your willingness, you have to demonstrate that you're willing to commit, really work hard, right? That's what they want. They want people with a positive attitude who's going to, work the long hours and be coachable, teachable, is in it for the learning opportunity and that experience more so than anything else. So, that was a realization that I started to have towards the end of the recruiting process. And certainly when I was on the other side doing the recruiting is you see people who are like, very proud of and you should be, right? If you're doing all that preparation, you will be proud of your technical preparation, but don't forget about the behavioral side of this, that you're at the end of the day, it's a team job. You're working in teams and you have to have a personality, right? Some energy to you that people are going to want to work with, not just, a complete finance geek.
Exactly.
Yeah.
100%. I mean, you heard it here. You've heard it. I've heard it before. I think that's really well-placed advice, though. The technical prep, it's 100% required. It is 100% foundational. It's only going to get you in the door. It's going to get you the interview, but it's never going to get you the offer.
Yes, that you nailed it. And I think that's a hard thing to realize because that's a big part of that's what takes the most time, right? So you want it to pay off. You want that to also be the biggest kind of contributing factor to getting a job, but that's not the case necessarily.
Yeah. Well, since you've been on both sides of the table, like what's one of the behavioral things that you would look for in candidates?
For me, it was always like the positive attitude and energy. Like to me, that's always what separated. I think that's what separated me during some of the processes, and that's what I kind of look for when evaluating candidates, right? So again, baseline need for like you've demonstrated some level of work ethic, whether that's through your GPA programs you've done outside of your classes, like you're taking those steps forward. That's kind of the baseline. But after that, it's like we talk about the airport test. Like, do I think I could spend like an hour at the airport with this person, or is it going to be kind of dull, or do I want to work with this person? And it's hard to evaluate that in a 30-minute, 60-minute interview, but that is kind of what you're trying to do. And so I think as an interview candidate, like one of the things I try to do, if you can leave like one impression with that person, right? What do you want it to be? Like, do you want it to be this person is just so like feverishly like passionate about learning and just really committed? Do you want it to be that this person is, really energetic and really like, it seems like he or she could be fun to be around, for 16-hour days plus whatever it is. So just at least whatever that is for you, try to have that thought in your mind as you're kind of preparing for interviews and how you craft your questions.
Yep, because you're going to be spending a lot of time with these folks. So you gotta, you want to be a good person to be a good coworker and be enjoyable to work with. Well, hey, Way, really appreciate your time. We've gone over a couple minutes. Great conversation, and just wanted to thank you for your insight, your input, your advice. I know it's going to be helpful for a lot of people. So just wanted to express that appreciation.
Thanks so much. Had a ton of fun with the conversation. You asked great questions, Ben. And Adventist was huge for me. So you and Dave have always been great to me. Had a blast teaching with you at some campuses. So great to hear that.
I know. Good times.
Really well. Yeah.